Yeah, you're all welcome to the Movement for African Emancipation COVID-19 discussion, deliberation, and analysis. We intend to look at these side effects of coronavirus on our community, on our country, and the pathway on which Nigeria is on, and to discuss with our comrades over here at M.A.E. and to have to share our knowledge on these issues from a revolutionary perspective. And of course, we have to go into the background of COVID-19 and its spread into Nigeria. So general news was that it emerged from Wuhan, China, and that an Italian man brought it into Nigeria, and it was reported by the NCDC, that's the Nigerian Center for Disease Control, on the 27th of February. So we would like to get our comrades over here. So we have three comrades on the panel: Comrade Shango, Comrade Sakub, and Comrade Yinka over here to share their knowledge with us. So I'll put the first question to Comrade Shango, that with the index case in Nigeria, what was the approach of the Nigerian government in handling it that made it spiral out of control? You know, we have to weigh with the Ebola and see how it was tackled, and COVID-19 seems to be out of control. So can you share with us, Comrade Shango, what was the approach of the Nigerian government or the ruling class in handling this that made it spiral out of control?
Thanks, comrade. If we go back, we will remember that at the beginning of this crisis, it was obvious we had a malfunctioning government. The government was very slow to close its borders or establish strong protocols, whereas other African countries such as Uganda had already begun to quarantine incoming visitors. The word even went round that the reason why the air borders were not closed early was because the government was waiting for the president's daughter to arrive from abroad. If you remember, there was suspicion that she might have had the virus and she was therefore put under isolation. Whatever the truth of this, the fact was that a quicker closure of the borders would have been an effective measure. Even at that time, when some protocols were established, such as checking temperature of those arriving, our legislators exempted themselves. They felt they were above the same rules that were supposed to apply to the general population. This is the general attitude of Nigeria's ruling elite. As we saw during the burial of the former chief of staff, as well as when legislators went to visit him in Aso Rock, the same measures they asked to apply, they don't apply to themselves. How then do you get people to believe the thing is serious and they should behave accordingly? We also had the problem of the religions being reluctant to accept that their gatherings must stop. Government was also slow to communicate why this had to happen. Then when a lockdown is declared, obvious government corruption means that palliatives don't get to people. From the federal to the state to the local governments, all have been shown again to be corrupt. If this is happening, why should people obey any measures to contain the spread? And you see, when they even decided to take action, it was just to copy what they were seeing in Europe. They have no initiative themselves. There's a lot more we can say about the failure, not just to have contained the spread at the beginning, but also they have no proactive health policy. They can't even think about traditional herbal medicine and so on.
Those were very, very important points Comrade Shango touched upon. And, you know, what we've had pre-existing in the country, which was the poor healthcare system, very low GDP, which means that people don't have money put aside to cope with the shocks of COVID-19, you know, to take from and spend. Well, we also have poor housing condition. Housing scheme is so poor. We live majorly in ghetto and shanty towns. So how do we practice the so-called imported social distancing when 100 people 200 people live in ghetto or shanty towns, or face me, I face you. People have to go out to forage for food like animals. If people don't go out to look or do what we call handwork, they can't eat. And of course, we have a country that has refused, the leadership has refused to come into the online age, to make sure that we have internet infrastructure that is functional. So it has led to this shock, putting a huge dent on people, because I was going to touch on the pre-existing conditions that made the coronavirus hit so hard, in Nigeria, and which were the lovely points that Commissioner Go just pointed out to us in his analysis of the issue on ground, the lackadaisical attitude. And this also points out to the class power and class domination. The country will keep being open until the children of the elites come back. This is really, really, pointing that the lives of their own children is more important than the lives of millions of Nigerians. And this is one of the numerous ways that they keep on exposing their domination of the Nigerian people, not caring about their health or their well-being. Thank you for answering the questions, Comrade Shango. Now I'm going to have to move to our other panelists on this discussion. I'm calling on Comrade Yinka to kind of tell us, in the wake of this COVID-19, we had numerous donations by some elites and corporate agencies to the government. And why are we seeing, why aren't we seeing anything concrete in terms of research, in terms of infrastructure to rapidly tackle this virus? We just see billions and billions being donated here and there to some corporate agencies, government here and there, but we're not seeing anything concrete. We're not seeing things being put up, or mobilization, real mobilization, to tackle this thing seriously. It just seems as if there was a PR campaign on the part of, the elites to just say, oh, they are dropping money here, and then, while on the other hand, we see them cutting salaries, which is undermining the coping mechanism of the people you're employed. So can you tell us why we've not seen anything concrete happening or noteworthy happening, even after so much donations by the so-called big and corporate agencies?
Well, I'll begin by saying that you cannot give what you don't have. And that is what we've witnessed so far since the spread of the virus in Nigeria. The Nigerian state cannot give what they do not have. And that is what we've seen clearly since the spread of the virus. If we check the background of the Nigerian state, we'll discover that it reeks of incompetence from the bottom up. Real incompetence. Because it seems as though we lack the human resources to help with researches. It seems as though we lack institutions to help with researches to curb the spread of the virus and to provide solutions. A lot of money has been donated by corporations and individuals, but this money are not put into good use. They start lying. They say they spread the money, they spend money on palliatives, they spend money on SMSs. These figures they claim to have spent on this on palliatives and SMS are exaggerated because Nigerians are groaning. We have cases where people are complaining that they did not receive palliatives. They failed in providing an alternative, in curbing an alternative relief measures for citizens, despite the fact that they issued a lockdown. How do they want people to survive? Okay, now they also failed to provide medications. With all the money available, we do not have the human resources to help with researches to bring about a solution. So, what is clear to everyone, every Nigerian, is that the states have elected officials who are not competent to run the country, and they have to go because most of these people got this appointment based on favoritism. They are not even fit for the positions, and that is what we've seen now when duty calls in the face of the COVID-19 pandemic. They cannot provide solutions because the positions they occupy is not a position that they are supposed to occupy. So that is what we've been witnessing. We've been witnessing a poor handling of the virus because we have officials who are occupying positions they are not supposed to occupy.
Yeah, those were some serious points highlighted by Comrade Yinka over the favoritism and the incompetence of the personalities in office. And at the same time, I would also like to maybe add that this is how capitalism works, because when you have the same elites with their money given to their contemporaries or their bodies in government, it just keeps recycling amongst them. And in a way, it's a way to preserve their money from going to the hands of the people. So they give it back to their state custodians of the money, which maybe gives it to the foundations that they own. You know, so it's like a real recycling. It's not, they don't have the people at the center of any services that they are claiming to render. It's more about preserving their money and saving face in the wake of this disease and pandemic, because you see that most of the money didn't make its way to the people, and of course most of the people in government own this capital that are in the banks or are in the hands of these corporations. So that's how we see the intermingling of capital and state infrastructure or the state apparatus, how it merges and ultimately robs and takes from the people. And at the same time, if there's any palliative they say they want to give to the people, it's going to also be through these same agents, these capitalists, these same elites that are here for profit. So if they give billions and billions of naira, they're going to cut corners, they're going to make sure that they maximize profits before giving service to the people. So to a large extent, this is what we've seen, I feel that's happened in Nigeria, whereby the people have gotten the contracts to distribute palliatives or be in charge of stuff given by the government, which are the same crooks anyway, because I don't think there's a difference between people in government and the same bourgeoisie or so-called captains of industries and bankers. It's the same money recycling. So this is why you see that it's their pockets first before anything goes to the people. So this is probably a deeper reason why we don't see any input or any considerable input in solving the problem. We just hear big numbers, but we never see impact on the ground. Yeah. Thank you, Comrade Yinka, for the answer. I'll move to Comrade Dakube now. I'd like to ask, why is it that the Nigerian state is so hesitant to fund and explore local alternatives or herbs? We've seen Madagascar with their COVID mixture. They still have to put it through some sort of scientific scrutiny, but they said that it's been curing COVID patients, which is still left for scientific community to verify. But why is it that Nigeria is not looking into herbal alternatives and, of course, seeking even to do local research for maybe vaccines or some sort of treatment to help COVID patients recover? So I'd like to hear your opinion on that, Comrade Dakube.
Yeah, thank you very much for your question, Comrade Sukomi.
I would like to draw my answer from the root cause of our problems, because if we don't try much as possible to understand the root cause of our problems, we will just be there parabolating, trying to solve the symptoms. We also need to understand that the ruling class who are in the affairs of this country are products of neo-colonialism, which means they are only fantasized with the view of the Europeans. They are pro-West. They lack the ability to look for African solutions to African problems. With all the enormous money Africa has been seeing from our resources, especially from oil, and we are still one of the purest continents in the world, that shows that those we call our leaders lack the responsibility, lack the ability to build Africa, to create infrastructure for us to be able to add our own input to African and the world solutions as a whole. Yeah, on the cases of the Madagascar, I know there have been a lot of propaganda and conspiracy about the whole issue, but I just want to just go straight and try to be positive here. I think this is an avenue for we Africans to try much as possible to improve what our ancestors have left for us, which is the app, trying to refine it into a more scientific approach, and I felt like it's not only app. We should try much as possible to look all forms of variables of African problems for us to be able to create our own African solutions, because if we don't try much as possible to build Africa, we will always be a dump site for the Europeans and for the Chinas, just trying to just bring whatever they've been produced and dump it in Africa, which all affect us, because we need to understand that Africa as a whole presently today, we're a continent of consumption. We need to move from that era and move into the production mode, whereby we're able to create our own product into the world. And through this, we can only do that on the template of African education, because through African education only buttress on trying to look for a solution to a problem. And on the case of the NDC bill, we also need to understand that in this country, if we were to check on it statistically, 75% out of the Nigerian masses don't trust the government. And they believe that whenever we have cases like this, the ruling class will always try to use their power to get it in their own interest. And if you look at the bill as a whole, you will try to realize that the couple is from Singapore. You are trying to borrow a concept from Singapore, and you have not tried much as possible to go through it. Maybe it suits African way of doing things, or it suits the society as a whole. And if you check the bill, it even puts more power to the ruling class, and the African people, especially the masses in Nigeria, are so scared because the bill itself has bestowed a lot of power, which means that on the failure of the government, which have failed us to create infrastructure, this bill will give them the right to will give them the right to use any individual complex or building or property as an isolation shelter. That means it's a failure, because with the enormous amount of money being budgeted for the healthcare center since the time of military regime till now, there's no visibility for it. So it has become a natural phenomenon whereby whenever we have issues, those who are meant to be our representatives are not doing what they are meant to be done. The only try much as possible to look for the solution on the expense of the masses. And through this, they bring that iota of subjugation, of oppression, trying to use political power to suppress the masses. So in conclusion, what I would just have to just say in this question is that I think it's now our people need to understand that those who are in power are not there
to represent their interests. They are there to represent their class. And it is time for we African people have to look within each ourselves and bring out viable leaders. I try to bring viable leaders who will take this continent and our country Nigeria forward. Thanks.
Thank you, Comrade. These are very, very essential points that you hit. The idea of being neo-colonial, always waiting for the West or even any other civilization to always give. If you're waiting for other people to give you on the world stage, then automatically you won't have any contribution to humanity, because you'll be a society of beggars and society of people that are not manufacturing or creating anything. So that's one of the relics of colonialism. It halts or freezes our development. And it's good that you mentioned the NCDC bill, which gives so much power to an already unaccountable ruling class. You know, when you have a mix of laws written to empower a class that is not democratic, that doesn't represent the will of the people, it makes it essentially more authoritarian and makes their bad choices or bad decisions permeate more into society. So that bill has not gone through the verification or acceptance or some sort of democratic screening from the people, and the people already know with the previous behavior or the antecedents of the Nigerian government that the ruling class is never in our favor. You know, so that's why we see a pushback of this NCDC bill, which hasn't gone through the people. You know, so it's showing us one more time that our government isn't run, you know, by the will of the people. They parachute things down on top of the people. So this is another key point that we must understand, and that whenever any law comes out, we should always check to see what class is it catering to, who and who is it attending to, and who are the people that are losing or benefiting from any law, be it financial, political, economic, cultural. And then it allows us to be more politically mature in our analysis. Thank you, Comrade Dakib, for the brilliant answer. So I'm going to move over to Comrade Shango to discuss the emergence of multiple waves of robberies, lootings, and killings, and essentially antisocial behavior, you know, on the part of the masses during the total lockdown. You know, we saw the establishment of community vigilante squads, you know, people killing themselves, going into neighborhoods to rob and all that. Why do we have such a problem, you know, in our society in the wake of this COVID-19 lockdown? And also, please, Commissioner Go, can you educate us on that?
Well, in Nigeria for a long time, the people have been forced to be their own government, provide their own water, provide their own electricity, and of course, provide their own security. The more that government doesn't do what it is supposed to do, the more people have to provide their own solutions. The situation was already drastic before COVID-19 came along. If we remember, the Lagos state government decided to make a lot of people jobless by banning Okada and Keke Marua. At that stage, it was already predicted that crime will rise. With COVID-19 coming along and then the lockdown, which made many informal workers unable to work, such as young people involved in the transport business, it was no surprise when there was a spate of crime. In that scenario, again, the people were forced to provide their own security, which were the community vigilantes. Although a careful reading of the gang attacks shows that much of it did not actually happen, but was the results of warnings sent out by these gangs, such as 1 million boys, to communities, which made communities panic and institute measures to protect themselves. Let's take these gangs. They didn't suddenly appear. They are symptoms of the severe crisis we have been under for some time. Parents are unable to care for their children as they should, and inevitably, the children end up in these gangs. Due to the terrible economic conditions the government has put people through before even COVID-19, it was predicted that such things will get worse. The funny thing is, people say if the poor cannot find anything to eat, they will eat the rich. But the reality is that the poor will eat themselves before they get to the rich. The sad thing is those who should organize and lead anger against the right sources are not available. This is a sign of the failure of the Nigerian left and movements for the people. And it is something that needs to be rectified. I mean, instead of people providing security, water, light for themselves, shouldn't they be organizing to make the government do what it is supposed to do?
Thank you, Comrade Shango, for the explanation. One key point that I picked up in your explanation was that these issues are interconnected, and we shouldn't look at crime rates and joblessness in a vacuum. They are interconnected. Once you dispossess people of their jobs and their ability to take care of themselves, you are going to get higher crime rates. And this is a country that is not productive, that isn't manufacturing, that is stagnating away, would end up churning out illiterate people, poor people, and a poor society is never a safe society. People have to survive, feed, and take care of their children. So we are going to have a high crime rate at the end of the day. So this is a very, very important thing that all political analysts must look at. These issues are interconnected. You can't look at homelessness, poverty, and economic hardship in a vacuum. They are all interconnected. And how we have high concentration of wealth in the hands of a few and majority of people are starving, you start to see that the poor react to this, and like you brilliantly said, they're going to that horizontal violence will be amongst the poor at first, but the left and all political organizers must try to galvanize the poor, let them see the root cause of their problem, and of course direct their action into a more conscious and mature political action, which is changing the system that causes misery and poverty. Over to our second panelist, Comrade Yinka. I'd like to ask, we've been seeing numerous cases of so-called mysterious deaths in the northern part of the country, and maybe an interstate transference of almajiri. These are out-of-school children begging for alms in Islamic or Arabic schools. I know. What can we say about this? What is the side effects, or how will I put it? What is the nature of this problem? How does this add to or remove from the COVID-19 issue? And of course, we have to see that in the isolation centers in the north, we see a lot of chaos going on there. A lot of trucks filled with northern people coming into the south, but this, I'd say in my own opinion, has always been happening. People move to the economic nerve and economic centers, but we have to just ask ourselves in this issue of COVID-19, what is the role and what has been so bad, what has made the northern states significantly worse in handling the COVID-19 and with the spate of mysterious deaths that we're seeing. What can you say about this? What is wrong up there? Not that the south is perfect anyway, but it's just been serious over there. So what can you tell us about this?
Yeah, I think the reason why people are dropping dead in the north is nothing other than the spread of the virus in that region. Though there are different testaments to why people dropped. Some say it is pneumonia, some say it is malaria, some say it's all kinds of different excuses were being brought up by the state officials, of which we know they are not accurate information. So, and considering the level of poverty in that region, we will discover that people are exposed to the virus because there are a lot of homelessness in that place. Homelessness in high numbers. So, again, it still goes back to the failure of the government, Because in Kaduna, we have doctors who are on strike and they are not ready to treat patients because they are being owed salaries. I mean, state officials, I mean, those who are in power, there's never been a time where they don't receive their allowances and their salaries, but they choose not to pay essential workers in departments that are important to survival as humans and as citizens of Nigeria. So what do you expect when there is no doctors, when there are no doctors to treat patients, and you have kids who are out of schools, who are below poverty line, who are homeless? What do you expect? What they do is they try to escape. And I think that is the reason why they have been trooping en masse to Lagos. They are trying to escape the horrors in the north. And I will say this again. We must hold our government responsible for the death, the avoidable death that has visited these people, the people in the northern part of Nigeria, because they are Nigerians. Whether people bring up excuses like, why don't they control birth rates here and there? And then I ask people, how many are we in Nigeria? And is the resources Nigeria is generating, or the way Nigeria is generating, is it not enough to cater for everybody? But because we have some pot-bellied, selfish, unqualified persons in position of power, that is why we keep seeing failure in all government sections, and this must stop. The government is responsible for this, and drastic action must be taken to make sure that our people are protected and they are treated as citizens as such.
Thank you, Komiyinka. I also like to add that the government, as you rightly put, or the cultural structure of the North over there, and the way they run things, and the lack of education, illiteracy, poverty, and all, has now, with the mixture of COVID-19, has turned into something that is very detrimental for them up there. And especially, when we look at the fact that, to a large extent, the elites have made the people not have access to education, basic sanitation, and everything that makes us live in a decent and dignifying manner. So these people are at the mercy of their elites, and it's unfortunate that they have to now flee, which is a testament to the fact that there is no such thing as a functioning government, as a functioning system that takes care of the people. When you flee from a place, it means that there's really nothing to do anymore in that region or locality, because it's not supporting life, it's not supporting any form of hope for you and your children. This is why most times when you see trucks bringing livestock from the north, you see these people on top of these trucks. They'd rather come to the south for small jobs like suya, M.A.E, riding bikes and all these things, and contributing to the population increment in the south and other parts of Nigeria. But with the really high level of terrorism problems over there, and looking at this disproportionate amount of wealth concentrated in the hands of the northern elites, it's a contradiction that we have the highest rate of poverty and a low level of medical attention and care to the people that are supposed to be having it. Thank you. Comrade Dakub, I'd like to ask, because we've all been seeing in the news and on media, numerous religious leaders coming up with prayer points, holy water, posting of healing and all that. What has been the role of the religious leaders and even traditional rulers in this outbreak? COVID-19 outbreak, we can't overlook or cast them aside as galvanizers in society and as people that have influence on the masses. So what has been their role? Can we give them a scorecard with this COVID-19 issue on ground, in the context of Nigeria, where religion, has a stronghold, and of course we still have a bunch of traditional institutions that it should be an expression of the people's choice and people's will. So what has been the performance of religious leaders and traditional rulers in the wake of this COVID-19?
Yeah, this is a very good question. I really like to just point out one or two things to the Nigerian people. Yeah, we need to take our minds off the hero mentality, like some certain people are going to change our lives. No, we really have to understand that both the religious leaders and the traditional leaders are part of the bourgeoisie of this country. They haven't done anything significant to improve the ordinary level of the Nigerian masses. Check the lifestyle of these so-called traditional leaders and the religious leaders. You see them, they live large, they live big. They represent the interpretation of what luxury is all about, what power is all about, what individualistic motives is all about. So whoever is on with the people to advance their life, or whoever is on with the people to create an egalitarian society, cannot be part of our problems. We need people who will drop their status, who will drop their purification of whatever the society have made them to be, and see themselves as ordinary citizens like every other person. So for me, I think even from the upset, what has the religious leaders done and the traditional leaders done? Even the religious leaders have done so much harm to the extent that they've created a mystics of spirituality to give people as an hope for their problems, and which is wrong. And this is one of the major reasons putting Africa back, because why? We've left the scientific approach of seeing our problems and solve it once and for all. We always believe that we need the interference of the supreme or divine being to solve our problems, which is just so archaic mentality. Because we don't have to understand that the problems affecting us as the people is being created by those who are the enemies of the Nigerian masses, who are the enemies of the proletaries of the world. So we don't have to come together and organize, and we don't need any big name of personality to come and do whatever needs to be done for the people. If you are willing to do something for the people to improve their life, you have to do it again. Come together and let's create a unification, a new society of an egalitarian ideology, and through that, Pan-Africanism can work, our economy can work, our political structure can be of the interest of the community, our social structure could be in the interest of proving our heritage, our traditions, our customs to the world. So this is my submission to this question. Thank you very much, comrades.
Thank you, Comrade Akil, for that. You touched on a key point, which is the stark contrast between the way the religious and traditional elites, how they live and how their people live, how the masses live. They live in affluence while the people scrap for food every day, and this is showing that there's a huge disconnect. And again, they've now joined in with the elites and the state bourgeoisie and the political elites to keep the people down, to leave them in mysticism and not teach them that they can rise up to change their conditions. Because once the people understand that, they can now start seeing that the elites, the traditional rulers and the religious leaders that are keeping them in mysticism are part of the problem. So, and the lack of political understanding, the lack of education and scientific understanding, cause and effect. We as a society, because of the failure of government in education, policy, scientific understanding, our research and development, the people generally don't understand. You see a lot of people rinsing their hands, drinking the water in the wake of COVID-19, which is telling us that basic knowledge, basic understanding is not present. And a lot of people fall into mysticism, fall into what their religious leaders say as the men of God, and move on that, which still maintains the system. We leave the fact that man is who can change society and not some heavenly force, And when you keep pointing to heaven as where the solution comes from, this is where how the masses never make any move. So the interplay of religious leaders and traditional rulers is also a pointer that they are all together. They all make up the system that keeps the masses down. And in the case of virus and pandemics, it is in no way they are in no way of any help to the people. They are keeping them in a condition of disadvantage. Thank you, Comrade Akub. I'm going to move to Comrade Shango now to wrap this session up. To tell us in a nutshell, from a revolutionary and Pan-Africanist perspective, what could have been done to tackle this COVID-19 issue, and how can we arrange society in such a way that we are strong enough to cope with shocks and external pressures like COVID-19 and other issues, economic issues and all that. What can we do from historical or Pan-Africanist perspective? So just let's just start to wrap it up and wrap this session up. Thank you.
The nature of the Nigerian state means that we were always going to be in a bad situation to cope with COVID-19, because measures such as social isolation and long-term lockdowns are difficult when adequate housing is not available and there is no safety net for people in terms of welfare, jobs, and health provision. Regardless, much more could have been done by the Nigerian government than it did. Its actions simply help to illustrate again how much people need a new way of being governed. In terms of its approach, let's look at other smaller African countries' responses. Senegal began to respond to COVID-19 in January and was quick to close its borders. The country is also developing a testing kit that will cost $1 per patient. Ghana has also had a more robust response than Nigeria has had. A serious government ruling for the people would have had a robust response. Borders would have been quickly closed. If the government decided on a lockdown, then certainly it should find enough money to support people with palliative measures. The money is definitely there, just being stolen and misused. Creative measures would have been put in place. Look around the world, you will see countries putting in innovative solutions. I saw how Vietnam has handled the situation the other day. A country of 95 million people that shares borders with China, very low number of confirmed cases and deaths. From January 16, the government took action with strict quarantine protocols. Mobile apps were used for people to report cases quickly. ATMs are being used for disbursing rice. The government knowing that it couldn't implement wholesale lockdown and testing, it made sure that areas where the virus could have emerged were strongly quarantined and tests were done to stop it from spreading from those areas. A serious government in Nigeria would have taken necessary measures such as those. Free face masks should have been made immediately available. Testing should have been ramped up like Senegal and Ghana have done. Serious support should have been given to health workers who are on the front lines fighting on our behalf. Instead, we have heard about paltry sums as hazard allowances. Meanwhile, our senators get all sorts of ridiculous allowances like wardrobe allowances and newspaper allowances. If you see what Ghana did to support its health workers, you will feel shame as a Nigerian. E.g., they give out very good health insurance, tax exemptions for the health workers, additional allowance of 50% on their basic salary per month, and so on. No wonder so many of our doctors choose to live for other countries. And as we have spoken about before, a serious government will have taken seriously the search for local and herbal treatments. Instead, now they are importing the one from Madagascar when we have the potential to develop our own. I think COVID-19 helps to expose to people how really useless their leaders are when you compare them to those in other countries. They have no creativity. They are not interested in healthcare, not interested in education and research. The people really need to rise up to get the government they deserve.